Thank you for having us. So my name is Richard Henshall. I head up product management for the Ansible business unit at Red Hat. I'm joined by my trusty colleague Sean as well, who's going to show you the more important things you actually want to see, which is actually demonstrations of the technology. But I think before we started that, went into that, we sort of just wanted to give you a high-level explanation of what it is we're trying to do at Red Hat with Ansible as a tool. So I really hope that a lot of people are familiar with what Ansible is, right? So in the sense of a, agentless automation tool, obviously, based on Python, predominantly used by a lot of people for configuration management, but has a very broad application. But from us at the Red Hat perspective, we're always trying to offer the enterprise equivalent of what that open source tool delivers. And so the best way to start that is like, think about this quote, automation is now a boardroom imperative. It's easy to say automation's always been around in IT. What is IT if it's not automation, right? Cloud is the exemplary sort of definition of how automation is helping IT deliver services on an even grander scale than was ever possible before. But when we talk about automation in the enterprise setting, what we're really talking about is what do we actually want to do with automation for an enterprise, right? For all the employees. It's not just about individuals, it becomes about teams, it becomes about the organizational structure, how we sort of approach that. Because the reality is you have lots of things that you do, right? And we already talked earlier, the OpenShift, heavily automated container platform to allow you to do all those great things that you can do with changing the way your organization develops and deploys systems. But there's still other stuff left. There's your legacy, the stuff you've been doing for the last 20 years. Anything that involves a manual user user interface, anything where you have to have a document that you start typing commands into the command line. These are all things that can be automated. So whether it's in the infrastructure, whether it's in cloud, whether it's in network, whether it's in security, the whole area of IT can be automated. And that's what we're trying to sort of bring together is how do you bring Ansible up from being tool, a point solution that somebody uses, and make it a more ubiquitous, holistic capability that an organization can adopt to deliver the needs that they want through automation. And the reason for that is exactly what I talked about with those different technologies. You've got these different teams. Every organization has this problem, right? You've got different teams with different technology bases. You've got different silos of organizational control, of process, people that don't talk to each other, people that sometimes do talk to each other, but not necessarily in the nicest way you'd like. People with different operational models in the way that they approach things, right? So if you've got some teams doing more DevOps, more progressive, advanced stuff, but you've still got older teams that are more sort of stuck in a more ITIL or ITSM sort of focused approach. This creates conflicts between those groups. They're not operating in the same way. So typically we often see that lots of, technologies become consistent as they go across the cloud and edge as well. So we move out of the data center. You still use the same technology. People choose things based on the skill sets they've got, right? But as you move to those different locations, those skill sets, you also want to make sure that you support those people with the same common tooling that they can use across those places. So another aspect of what we're trying to do is how do you make sure you can use Ansible in the data center, in the cloud, or at edge, based on what it is you've got for your teams, what their capabilities are. So really trying to break down those silos, give them a single platform, single set of capabilities that they can build and automate on top of. And that's ultimately what the Red Hat Ansible Automation Platform is there to fix. So I'm jumping around a little bit, but the other aspect of this we also see, when you automate, and if people adopt different tools or people adopt Ansible, we also start to see people having different types of role in what they do. So it's not about being a developer, about being a network engineer, about being an infrastructure admin, being a sysadmin, middleware, or database. It's about how your relationship to Ansible is, to automation is. So you have people that create content and automation. Who's the expert with the subject matter expertise who knows how something should be done based on the organizational process, based on the technology standards you employ? Who's the person that's running the operations of the organization? Who's stopping and starting things when something goes wrong? Who's doing the troubleshooting? You have people who just want to consume automation, users. They don't care how it happens. They care that it does happen. I want to push a button and have a VM appear. Thank you very much. They're not bothered about the inner workings of it. And you also have the people that need to run that platform. right? You also have the people actually need to manage something, because anything you do in a larger organization requires somebody to run something as a service for those people inside. And so different parts of the platform are tailored towards those different personalities, right? There's different types of personas you get. So whether we've got Automation Controller, which is the management interface, whether we've got Automation Hub as our content source of truth, we've got a services catalog, and then you've got all the content that sits inside there. And finally, one of the latest things we just added is the content experience, which is we're starting to build more content development focused tooling, integration into IDEs. How do you help people move out of just using a text editor to write YAML? How do you move up towards no code and low code over time? These are sort of areas we're going by. But all of this is based on that Ansible open source. It's all a driver for what is delivered by the Ansible open source tooling. And then final little bit is really we're here to talk about clouds as well. Obviously, Ansible has a vast catalog of content that can be used against the different sort of cloud capabilities, whether it's the public clouds, whether it's against things like OpenShift and Kubernetes, or whether it's against existing established private cloud technologies.
Richard, I have a question. Ned Bellavance here. So my question is, the personas that you showed on the previous slide, you had content creators and domain experts, and I'm not sure I'm clear on what the difference is between those two.
Yeah, this is something we have a constant debate on, because you say, if I say you're an Ansible developer, does that mean you develop Ansible content, or you're a developer that uses Ansible? And this how people identify and what it means. So a content creator is someone who writes automation, right? So am I writing a playbook because I've got to deploy my application? Am I writing a role because I'm doing, how do I install and configure a standardized pattern of Nginx or a database Postgres, something like that, for example? But the domain experts are those people that maybe own the content, right? So if you've got a traditional IT organization with a middleware team, a database team, a rel team, and then you've got a bunch of app devs, those specialized admin teams don't tend to let the developers have access to their capabilities. So you often have people build a more service-based sort of capability. So I'll build, how do I do a standard installation of rel? How do I do a standard installation of my middleware on rel? Those teams create that content. They create those standardized pieces of automation, expose them up to the developers, who then have options to customize them, right, based on what's available to them in the settings. And so that content creator would be the person potentially writing that playbook for their application in question. But when either of those two teams create those services and expose them through the platform, users can still just call that automation without having to know what's in it, without having to choose settings or configuration. They can just push the button and get the end result.
So this was kind of all the different types of tools, the content domains being kind of use cases. I'm going to make a general assumption here based on the popularity of Ansible that probably most folks here have run a playbook at some point or seen someone run a playbook at some point. Specifically, like Richard said, we kind of see the downstream product as Ansible Automation Platform. The upstream project that most people are familiar with is Ansible project or the community project. When we use this platform, there's actually this is a reference architecture we're actually still working on. So this is just a architecture diagram I grabbed before this presentation, is saying that we actually have all these different tools and they have multiple upstream projects that people probably haven't heard of. So just like we would say OpenShift isn't a direct equivalency of Kubernetes, it has all these tools. The Ansible Automation Platform is not a direct equivalency of upstream Ansible. There's a lot of different tools, and some of these tools may not matter to an upstream user. They're upstream, they're open source, there's other tools going on, but they may not care because they're just running it from their laptop. They don't have a high availability problem, or they don't need to extend to multiple DMZs. They don't have a lot of these issues. The other thing you'll notice if you have any familiarity with Ansible in the past is the word tower's gone. Of course, in customer references, they might have bought Tower or Engine, which were previous products. Today, we sell just one thing, Ansible Automation Platform, and it includes everything. There's no piecemealing of different tiny little things for different use cases or whatnot. So I'm going to kind of concentrate on controller. Automation controller is the evolution of Ansible Tower. It includes a web UI, an API. It's moved to Patternfly, so it matches the look and feel of a lot of other Red Hat products, including what you see in the web. for the console.redhat.com. I would imagine some of you have probably seen Tower or AWX, which is an upstream component. But I'll just kind of do like a little debrief of controller and what it looks like. So we kind of defaults to a dashboard. There's a lot of integrations in here. If we go to settings, you can see that I can integrate with all my Active Directory, my Radius, my TACAX, like whatever the enterprise authentication is. We tend to try to say we don't reinvent the wheel with Ansible. We do automation really well, but we're not trying to like recreate crypto stores or like password vaults and all of that. We try to integrate with the tool of choice for the enterprise customers. I think the most important thing to understand about controller, to be suffice today, is everything revolves around the concept of a job or job template. These job templates are basically a disaggregated playbook. A playbook is a unit of automation. I'll show one in a second. I imagine most people have seen a playbook, right? A playbook's equivalent of other DevOps tools you've seen in the past, like a manifest or a recipe from Chef. But the difference here in controller is we're disaggregating these templates into three major pieces. There's a project, which is where we're storing it. Most of the time, it's something like Git and GitHub and GitLab. This is where we grab playbooks from. So you'll see I put some projects in here. You can see if we click edit in here that it's literally a repo that you can go and see after this talk. There's a concept of inventories. Again, you can add inventories and store them here, but what we see is a lot of people are actually syncing to some other CMDB, some sort of database. It can even be Git. It can be a file in Git that you sync as your dynamic inventory. It can be that simple. Finally, credentials. So credentials, we can store them. However, we see a lot of folks integrate with CyberArk and HashiVault. So we can store it. We have like DoD certifications to store it, but we don't have to. And a lot of our customers don't. But we're just aggregating these. And the reason that's important is these ideas of these job templates is we can build playbooks in succinct units that can be reusable. So everything within these job templates kind of has little two pieces. So we want to look at a workflow today. The workflow is interesting because it can take many job templates and break them out into like an orchestration layer. So when I click plus here into the visualizer for a workflow, I can choose different job templates in here. I can choose a specific job template, and this is a survey, which I'll show like where we edit this and what it looks like. These are AWS regions, since we're talking cloud today, and like how easy it is. And the way I kind of look at this is it's a low code approach where someone who's an automator creator, as we kind of break out these roles, as an enterprise becomes more mature with Ansible automation, is they can give some knobs and kind of like on guardrails to allow other users to do cool things and automate operational tasks, provisioning, whatever it has to be. So here, like I can add another zone, I can click next. It'll tell me all the information around that job template, including the playbook that it's loading. We click save and it adds another one. And I'll show some more advanced playbooks in a second. And we'll not, yeah, go ahead.
Real quickly, this is a great demonstration, by the way, where you're actually logged in. Where is this actually running? Is this actually in AWS, Azure, ARO, Rosa, et cetera?
So this is running on RHEL 8 in AWS right now. However, it's wherever you want it. It can be self-hosted, on premises. It can be in any public cloud. It's pretty trivial to install. It's actually a bundled installer. It's kind of like what I used to say eat our own dog food, but I've changed it to drink our own champagne, is the actual bundled installer actually uses Ansible to set it up. The only requirement is like RHEL 8.3 or newer, or you can run it on OpenShift. So you can install this as a native operator with our last release. So we can install this on OCP, and we can install Private Automation Hub as part of that as well. So it kind of is the best of both worlds. I think some folks think we only support Ansible as an app on OCP, and that's true. We support it, but we also support it on RHEL. So it's either or, and wherever you want it.
One last question, and this is regards to workflow. You mentioned it as a kind of workflow, but what I saw kind of looked more like a shotgun. Can you do like a priority flow of do this, then that, then this?
Yes, actually. All right, so this is, and this one doesn't even get as complicated as it can. Like we can have this link in here. Come on, edit. on success, on failure, or always. So always will go blue. So it'll always run this no matter the state of this job, or we can change it to run on failure and it'll go red. So I know like as soon as you get to 10 people, one of us is colorblind. So this is all programmatic as well. You can check the state, but there is colors. Ansible folks love colors. So it's really easy to make a workflow. Actually, I'll kick this off so you can see what this one looks like.
But following you, I could be able to use the workflow in order to clean up after myself. If I'm running a workflow and halfway through it crashes, I can do a failure to clean up all of the things that it did previously.
Exactly. Like one of the, so I come from the network world, like Cisco, and I worked at Cumulus that got bought by NVIDIA. And one of the classic examples I show is like try to do something on network automation. If it fails, revert to a backup, like a timestamp that I created at the beginning of that workflow. So it's like it's a pretty typical state. So this one's interesting. I'm kind of skipping a demo 3, but it's more fun, honestly, is starting to look at, like, I was going to start by saying, like, we can do provisioning on cloud. Like, we compete in a way with other vendors, but the way we've seen it is it's a solved problem. Meaning that, like, there's a bunch of ways to provision infrastructure on public cloud. So we can do it natively, and I'll show you a playbook in a second, but we also support native Terraform. So we have a Terraform module. So if a customer or community member wants to use Terraform, we can use it within a playbook. It's trivial. We also support native cloud declarative languages. So we have CloudFormation template module. We have Azure Resource Manager deployment modules. However, we also have, like, we can go step by step, which is what I tend to do just because I'm using Ansible by default as an Ansible employee. So what we see here is the same idea as, like, even if I'm talking to another management or another automation tool, is I can break those job templates up into like little rectangles here, and it goes one by one by one. And you'll see if I like dive into something like deploy an Azure database, I can click the output window and see the playbook like I would. So that knowledge from someone, that operational knowledge of being a Ansible expert by open source upstream stuff from their computer, they can take that, start leveraging a tool like Automation Controller, and then scaling it out for other people to use. Let me go back to the workflow. So this is still running. So the reason that's cool to me is each of these can actually, you can actually embed workflows within each other too. So you can nest them infinitely, although I've never seen it more than once or twice. And I'm not sure, honestly, like I've used it some and I've seen customers use it, but I don't know how the most amount of nesting. But the idea is, like, when we talk about breaking down silos, we can also use workflows. The idea is not to necessarily like force a system administrator or a cloud ops person to be an expert at something else, but they can now like sum up whatever that function is, like, hey, I want to install Nginx on a RHEL node, or I want to deploy a container to OCP, or I want to do something like interesting over here, into just one of these little units. And then that unit goes on. And like, the idea is that we can start focusing on business outcomes as this orchestration layer rather than the individual technology in there. So like every one of these could be Ansible, but it could just be an API call or programmatic call to another tool. So it becomes really easy. And you'll see, like, one of the examples we see a lot, I don't know if I threw a number out, there'd be like 40% of our customers seem to have ServiceNow in some shape, form, or fashion. It's just been like blowing up the last few years. So like we have supported ServiceNow modules. This playbook, what it'll do is we'll tie this by default back to a credential in Automation Controller. So this double bracket, for folks unfamiliar with it, this is just a syntax for a variable substitution. So this module, and you might notice something weird here too, if you're only familiar with upstream Ansible, is there's a namespace dot the collection name dot the module. And this is what we moved to in the newest release. So we'll be going GA in December timeframe. It's already early access on our website, is this idea of collections that allow asynchronous releases of content. We also have supported content. So on console.redhat.com, it creates a really easy way to tell the difference between upstream collections that may be like someone random wrote something and put it on Galaxy, and like the downstream curated list of collections and content that we have certified by partners. You can actually like sort by partners as well. And the reason this is important is it's really clear for like a throat to choke or hand to shake. Another one of those like champagne ones is understanding which ones are actually created in partnership with Red Hat and which one's just community. So the idea is not to get in the way of community members doing whatever they want, but making it easy for customers to understand what risk they're getting in there. And like, I'm sure Richard could talk to it, like our roadmap going on is even signing this content to make it really clear when you run automation content at scale is understanding like where it came from and what's happening. So you're not just installing like Bitcoin mining, like all over the place from some random collection you downloaded online. Specifically with ServiceNow, we worked with them getting this certified. We can grab all these different modules that come with it, including inventory plugins. So folks could even use ServiceNow as an ITSM, like a database, a CMDB to load inventory from. I've seen lots of customers do ticket change requests. I haven't seen them necessarily do inventory, but that's just anecdotal. I'm sure folks are doing it, but this is extremely popular, like the integration with ServiceNow. And even if you're using other Red Hat products, Ansible can act as like an API. So when you go into here, there's a browsable API that I can log into, and I can run any job programmatically in automation and have it kick back. So sometimes people might use a front end from a ticketing system like ServiceNow or Remedy or Zendesk or whatever they happen to be using, and they're not even using the user interface for controller. So it can also be a programmatic interface.
Just to clarify, because you're kind of bouncing around, how much of this is within the platform itself and hopping outside of it? It looked like you hopped outside of the platform and then kind of went back to it, available back and forth.
So the platform, we'll see how Richard corrects me, is like, I would think of the platform as like an Adobe suite of products that work together really well. So just like I have like Photoshop and Illustrator and Premiere and like all these applications. So controller is kind of like the heart of it, as it's where an operator will live. But there's different tools. So we consider when you buy that platform subscription, you actually get access to, so when I flipped over here, this was just another controller. So these are just two different controllers that I have installed. Where else did I flip? This is just GitHub. So when we sync playbooks, I tend to use GitHub. And then I think I might have showed this for a second. This is Visual Studio Code. So this is actually running off that node, but obviously Visual Studio Code is not a Red Hat product. It's just something we integrate with and have tools that integrate with it. So we actually have like a language server for Ansible and syntax highlighting and stuff. What else did I show? I mean, that's obviously AWS.
Console. So we've got on cloud@redhat.com, we have a bunch of hosted services applications that we give to customers as part of the subscription. And one of those things is the source of Automation Hub, which is the original content location. That's where all the certified stuff comes from Red Hat. But we give a private deployable version that people can put on their own premise, so they can stick it where they want, and they can sync all that content down to that private version, plus add their own curated content or sourced content from elsewhere. Because not all Ansible content is certified with Red Hat. A lot of it's elsewhere. So yeah, so there's three or four different components, but controller's the main one. Lots of people interact through the API. Lots of people use the UI. A lot of people don't even need to interact with it at all if they're just writing playbooks and writing content.
When you get that subscription to Red Hat, you also get access to console.redhat.com. So when you log in, it's really clear as there's RHEL hosted services, Ansible hosted services, OCP hosted services, and application services. So what I did here is like, I just went to Automation Hub and looked at the collections, and then this can sync directly to controller, or we can use something called Private Automation Hub that you can self-host just like controller. And then I can put my own collections in here and curate them directly with my, kind of think of it as a way to curate what my automation creators are using. And then this syncs down to automation controller or developer workstations where they're developing automation. So if you're familiar with upstream Galaxy, think of Galaxy as Fedora and Automation Hub as RHEL. There's an easy delineation between the upstream and downstream. And it makes it really easy to understand like what's fully supported and what might be like experimental or community and what have you.
Think about time. So go back to the workflow again. I think the final point we want to make on this. So when I talked about saying it's about bringing all those different teams together. So you've got that. You're talking to the ServiceNow piece. You've got deploying the Windows server. You've got various configuration steps. You've got database steps. You've got server steps. You've got deploying an ISS web server in this particular example. At the end of that, you then go and notify the team. So you can bring together multiple different artifacts and multiple different teams together in a larger workflow. I could construct that not knowing any of the things inside, but just being told what was possible for me to deploy and what configuration options I could pass in, stitch that together and structure it. I could also expose that to another user and say, you can create this and you can run this, and they don't even need to know any of this. So it's all about layering it up through those different users that you have. Again, focuses on broader, larger sort of enterprise organizations that have got much more complexity and many different types of user wanting to consume automation. Or that could all be just, like Sean's done all of that himself. So it could just be one person who happens to be knowledgeable and skilled in a bunch of different technologies. So it gives both sets the option to do those capabilities. So was there anything else you want to talk about, Sean? Otherwise, we need to wrap up and let the ACM.
Yeah, I guess the one thing I skipped that I just think is cool I'll mention is we think provisioning, deprovisioning, we think orchestration, right? But the last thing I wanted to talk about was just operational tasks where Ansible can help a lot. This is where I see like my team benefit a lot, is just like doing things in the day 2 configuration within cloud, like enforcing tags, unenforcing tags, turning things off at night. Like there's a lot of really cool kind of features that I see our own IT groups using and myself using to enforce things, like enforcing an ownership tag, for example, the one I was starting to show in here. Like it forces any instance, if it's not having the tag set up with my policy, it will shut it off so that there's ownership of AWS instances or Azure, whatever happens to be the public cloud. So I think this is like a very cool use case that I don't think a lot of people are using in automation today, is kind of not thinking outside of just setting up an application, but thinking about like all the operational activities like a cloud admin has to do today.
I think the one thing I'd say there. Yeah. But the one thing I think I'd just add to finish that off is this is something we see as like a cumulative effect of the more, people always start with the standard things. How do I build a box from scratch up? How do I install software? How do I configure the software? And then they start to go, okay, now how do I start and stop it? How do I attach that to some sort of detected, observed event and then apply some sort of auto remediation that I can then go and do something on? How do I build more self-healing is the term that's starting to come out around this, but it's more that I can observe what's going on. I can choose what actions to try and take before I call out the on-call person, right? And that's the same sort of capabilities that a lot of the more advanced platforms like OpenShift bring in, but you don't have to necessarily have developed all of your applications into that model to make it work. And I think you then get the best of both worlds when you've got both of those things. You can modernize a lot of your legacy while still developing all the new rapid, accelerated sort of capabilities with the modern application platforms.
So just to take that to kind of an enterprise platform, what you're describing is something that could possibly apply CIS compliance or STIGs or something like that? Is that
all of those things? Yep, absolutely. Yeah, we see lots of people doing that. I mean, we've got some rather large customers doing lots of, when you get really big, there's a lot of money to be taken out of by just reducing 30% of your number of ServiceNow tickets, or 30%, or shortening downtime, by 20%. There's a lot of money to be saved, a lot of money to be made there. And how do we make that applicable to all those people that aren't large multinationals with big bottomless pockets of money to invest in doing it, right? That's what we're trying to find that nice balance between.
Hey, and we can table this for now. I think one of the really cool things, and I don't know if we have enough time, if you can touch on it just like 30 seconds or a minute, is the execution environments and how important they are at scale.
So
we can table that if you want to.
If we want to tell that for the Q&A, but I mean, I just say for other people, right, basically, historically, Ansible Python application install on a system. Welcome to Python dependency hell, right? Especially when you start to have lots of those to manage. So as part of all that work, Sean mentioned about collections, extracted all the collection content from the main Ansible project. How do we give people back the ability to customize their packages of Ansible for different use cases, especially, network team, cloud team, storage team, Linux team, Windows team, all can have their own version, or different application teams. And then execution environments that containerize runtime. So that helps us with the packaging and the developer tooling. Also helps us with the scale out, because now suddenly you've got a much smaller footprint of an Ansible container. Pass it out anywhere you want, where a container can run, all good and happy. Now you've got a massive difference in scale as well. Super important for the edge, super important for cloud. There you go. That's my fastest
That's perfect.
in execution environment.
Much better than I could have done it. Thank you.